What's up, everybody? You're listening to Trail Tales. My name is Kyle O'Grady. I'm a thru hiker, I'm a peak bagger, I am a huge hiking nerd. And every single week on this podcast, I chat with another thru hiker, another peak bagger, and another hiking nerd about their experiences on the trail. Philip Carcia, he's back for his 4th episode of Trail Tales. It's been a while since we talked, though, and for this episode, we really kind of wanted to take a step back before his single year grid and just talk about some of the stuff that he had done, you know, when he was first getting into hiking and some of his previous thru hikes. And at the end of this episode, folks, Philip tells one of the craziest stories that I've ever heard on the show. Like, absolutely insane. He almost died, and he goes into detail. I think it's an entertaining story, and obviously there are things that we can all learn from it as well. So definitely stay tuned until the end. It was a great episode, and Philip, when you hear this, dude, I know we're going to do it again soon, so just thank you so much. Folks, I know you're sitting at home right now and not much to do, so you might as well take a second and go check out a couple things for me. First of all, my Instagram, at Kyle Hates Hiking. Go follow me on Instagram. The show's Instagram is at TrailTalesPod. If you like the show, feel free to send me a message on either one of those accounts and let me know, or you can send me an email, trailtalespod@gmail.com. Haven't plugged the email in a while, it feels like, so yeah, send me a message. Tell me what's good, tell me some suggestions for guests and trails you'd like to cover. Go do that. My YouTube channel is Kyle Hates Hiking. Go check that out. I'll have a link in the show notes, or if you just search Kyle Hates Hiking on YouTube, you'll find all of my goofy ass videos. And iTunes, go leave a 5-star iTunes review for Trail Tales. That would be much appreciated. I will start reading them again at some point in these introductions, but in the meantime, go leave one. Make it even more difficult for me to get caught up with those. I would really appreciate that. It's a great way to help support the show. And with that said, let's do it, folks. I'm not going to hold you up any longer. Let's get into episode number 72 of Trail Tales with Philip Carcia. What's up, everybody? Episode 72 of Trail Tales. Right now, Philip Carcia is back on the show. This is our 4th episode, I guess. It's kind of weird for me because the second and the third one like blended together because we did that like on the fly, like fuck it, let's just do 2 episodes kind of thing. But now, dude, here we are. Philip, what's up, man? Thanks for coming back on.
Kyle, my man, what's going on? It's always a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I can't believe that this is the big episode number 4. Right before we started recording, I was just kind of poking at you, asking which guest had been on your show the most amount of times, or which guest has been interviewed the most amount of times, and you were telling me it was your boy, and we were thinking he's been on 4 or 5 times. So yeah, I'm just coming for heads out here, Kyle. You already know.
Yeah, dude. Well, fortunately, you've done plenty of stuff. I don't think we're probably ever going to run out of shit to talk about, so it will not be the last Philip episode. I can guarantee that.
I hope not.
It won't be. But, dude, I don't have any questions planned or anything for these episodes. See, like, our first couple ones, like, back then, because it's been, over a year now, or at least a year since our first episode. I think it was like April, maybe end of April last year. And, yeah. Dude, I'm, like, trying to look at these, like, the Instagram thing at the same time. It's, like, fucking me up.
Multitasking.
Yeah. Dude, back then, I would just come with a bunch of questions, not just for you, but for all my guests. But I don't have anything right now.
Wow.
And
bold move.
I have absolutely no doubt about being able to fill an hour with you because, like, dude, you've got, like I said just a minute ago, you've done so much stuff, and you're also a pretty damn good talker. You are like a podcaster's dream, Philip, because I'm always worried when I do these episodes. I guess this hasn't really ever happened, so I shouldn't be worried, but I'm always worried that my guest is just gonna give like 1-word answers and I'm gonna like struggle to come up with shit to talk about for an hour. But with you, it's quite the opposite. I feel like if I did write down questions, we wouldn't even be able to get to all of them because we just go tangent after tangent and story after story. So I'm excited, man.
Kyle, man, all these compliments. I don't know what to do with them, man. I hope I live up to the hype here. You're building this up to be massive. I hope I got some good tales to tell.
You will be good, dude. Well, I guess the rough plan, like I said, I don't have any specific questions, but the rough plan is to just talk about Philip's experience pre-single year grid. So all of our episodes previous to this one have been about the single year grid. Makes sense. Obviously, given the timing and stuff, but you've done so much stuff before that, and I haven't really ever had the chance to hear you talk about that, and I'm sure a lot of people would be curious to hear about that as well. So, dude, where should we start? You've probably said this before on our first episode, but what was your first, like, besides the Mid-State Trail, I guess, what was your first, like, a long, like, through hike?
I mean, that was kind of it, man. That was like the beginning of so many things for me. I mean, like I've mentioned in your podcasts and in many other podcasts and in almost every single year grid presentation that I've given, I climbed my first mountain at the age of 16 in central Massachusetts. I grew up in the city of Worcester. The first mountain that I climbed was Mount Wachusett, small little hill in central Massachusetts, beautiful little hill in central Massachusetts. And that just gave me such a unique perspective moving forward in terms of, you know, how I wanted to spend my time, how I wanted to focus my energy. It was really, it was, you know, a beginning before a beginning, so to speak. I mean, this was 10 years before I hiked the Mid-State Trail. The Mid-State Trail came in 2006. It was my first truly long distance hike, or what was supposed to be my first truly long distance hike. Yes, I had started hiking at the age of 16. Yes, I had spent the better part of my late teens and early 20s kind of, traveling around central Massachusetts, traveling up to the White Mountains, cutting my teeth, making mistakes, learning just a whole bunch of, what it took, or learning a whole bunch about what it took to, you know, spend time in the mountains, and feeling comfortable while you're doing that. But it wasn't until 2006. It wasn't until I set out to walk the Mid-State Trail that I ever had any really long distance hiking experience. You know, all my trips in Massachusetts, all my hikes in Massachusetts, all my hikes in the New Hampshire, whether they were a day or maybe 2 or 3 days at the most, you know, they paled in comparison to what the Mid-State Trail was supposed to be like. Because of course the Mid-State Trail, of course it's for people who don't know, or people who aren't familiar, the Mid-State Trail is a 92-mile route across central Massachusetts. It starts at the border of New Hampshire and in north central Massachusetts, goes down to the Rhode Island border in southern central Massachusetts, and it stretches the entire state top to bottom. And it's not plentiful in topography. It's not necessarily plentiful in challenges. It's a pretty easy hike, but it was the first time that as a hiker, as a backpacker, I had ever stared down, a week-long trip, a 100-mile trip, regardless of how challenging or how easy it was supposed to be. It was truly my first brush with the long-distance hiking experience. And that trip, like I kind of alluded to, that trip went south very early. Like I said, it's a 92-mile route across Massachusetts, and I lasted about 30 miles on that trip before I had to actually throw in the towel and call it a day. And the reason for that was just just being very ill prepared. Even though it was only 92 miles, even though it was through central Massachusetts, even though there was something like 6,000 feet of vertical, for the entire hike, for all intents and purposes, this is a very easy long distance hike. I was just very ill prepared.
Dude, and every time I hear you tell this story, it just reminds me so much of my situation with the long trail.
We have talked about this a bit. I think we talked about this in the first episode.
In the first one, yeah. It's just so similar. Like 30 miles, home state trail, like had no clue what I was doing, totally fucked it up. But went back to do it a second time, which I know.
And you were on the long trail, is that's correct?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, for me personally, and this is cool for anybody who's listening, you can jump onto my Instagram page, Finding Philip, and I've got a picture of myself at the start of this hike. Pretty iconic picture. I'm, standing outside of my house at the time in cargo shorts. I've got, super tall white socks on with some Adidas shoes. I've got a North Face cotton tee. Abercrombie & Fitch cotton tee. I've got a North Face hat on, and I've got a 55-liter EMS Summit backpack, expedition backpack, filled to the brim with a bunch of unnecessary stuff to walk 92
I'm going
miles
to use
across.
that photo in the thumbnail for this.
You know what?
For this
I
episode.
think
People are going to be like, "Who the hell is this scrub?"
we talked about using the thumbnail of me on Mount Whitney. I think actually the more
true.
appropriate thumbnail should be of me in 2006 at the beginning of the Mid-State Trail, rocking Abercrombie and Fitch Adidas shoes and a North Face hat. That would be very, very funny.
So good, so good.
I was just, yeah, man. I was not well researched. I was not well prepared, and went out there and immediately started getting blisters, and couldn't set my tarp up that I kind of made, and the weight of my backpack was just insane, and it was unlike anything I'd ever done, and that unfortunately forced me off the trail on the Mid-State Trail after 30 miles. But I look back on that, man, and again, of all the same way all of those very early experiences were formative and full of knowledge. The Mid-State Trail in 2006 was very much the same way. I mean, it was a huge learning experience.
It's crazy. Like first time through hikes and back, even back, just backpacking trips. Like I feel like it either goes one of two ways. Either way, it probably is going to suck, but you either get like super inspired from that, kind of like it sounds like we did. We're like, okay, well, I want to improve and be able to have a better time doing this and actually be able to do this successfully. Or you just are like, this sucks, like, fuck this, and then you just never do it again. So I'm glad to hear that we both had a similar experience there. I'm glad to hear that we both went on to continue to pursue not just hiking, but long distance hiking and through hiking. And I just think that's so awesome. And I just love how similar our stories are there, dude. I was going to ask you to go forward a little bit. So let's talk. I want to hear like about, I think, was it the AT? Was that the first like long distance through hike you did?
So I went back and, after I very humbly succumbed to the brutality of the Mid-State Trail in 2006, I went back that same summer, and I finished the trail up the last 70 miles or the last 60 miles in sections, 10-mile day hikes. And then the following summer, like you kind of just spoke on, I mean, I obviously recognized my shortcomings. I accepted the fact that I had a lot of things to learn. I had a lot of pointers that I needed to take. And I went back that following summer and I took on the long trail. So in 2007, that following summer, that was my first real continuous, I didn't quit. I made it, all the way. I stuck it out, multiple resupplies, 0 days, the whole 9 yards. That was my first real successful continuous through hike. And then obviously based off of that experience, my life continued to change and go into a very specific direction. And that following year, so 2 years after I hiked, the Mid-State Trail, the following summer after I hiked the long trail, I got on the AT headed northbound in 2008. And that was, my first 2,000-mile plus effort, my first multi-month backpacking project. Yeah, and really just the solidification that this was something I was going to spend a good portion of my life doing.
So how did you feel when you first got on the AT? Because our, again, so much is similar here. Of course, our later stories are very different, but the beginning here, it's like the long trail, I guess, and the Mid-State Trail too, but like the long trail just being like your first solid, through hike, I guess, before you hit the AT. Like, how did you feel like that prepared you? Because that was the same thing for me. The long trail was the only, proper through hike I had done before I hit the AT. So I felt like I was pretty freaking prepared. And I know it was a different time back then too, but I'm just curious to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I am like any normal human being out there. I am, riddled with self-doubt at certain points and riddled with a real strong determination and confidence at certain times. And I remember, when I finished the long trail, I just was at such a high, such a peak. I felt very confident and going into the Appalachian Trail, making the decision that I was going to go ahead and hike the Appalachian Trail the next year. I mean, that was done with, again, a certain amount of confidence that this was something I could absolutely do. But of course, over time, even though, there was really not that much time or that many months in between when I finished the long trail and started the Appalachian Trail. I finished the long trail in September and I started the AT in April. It's funny how getting settled back into the day to day of normal life and getting comfortable again and having the hardships of the trail, the hardships of through hiking start to kind of rust away, so to speak. It's crazy how you can start to question yourself again, and it's crazy how you can start to just kind of look at yourself and wonder, is this something that I can actually go out and do? But of course, there is this thing in the back of you saying, well, like, you did it once. And if you hiked, 270 miles on the long trail and felt okay afterwards, like all you got to do is just, do that, 9 more times.
Yeah, rinse and repeat.
Exactly. And so there was this air of confidence, even through the self-doubt where it was like, I think this is something that I can do. And I think this is something that I can actually do well. And again, regardless of how difficult it was going to be and regardless of how many moments of self-doubt kind of popped up in the lead up to starting, it always kind of felt like this was my path. And I don't know, man, I think if I'm a realist at heart, so going into anything with 100% confidence, going into anything and saying, this is exactly what I'm going to do and this is exactly how it's going to happen. There's just too many variables in life. And when you're talking about through hiking, when you're talking about multi-month projects, I mean, there's just too many variables. So, I make these plans and I start these projects with a certain amount of confidence, a certain amount of self-doubt, but always knowing that, what happens at the end, I mean, is only so much in my self-control. So it's interesting. I think that's the way that I felt going into the AT, and that's also kind of the way that I felt with every single project that I've taken on, because you just, no matter how much confidence you get, no matter how much you knock out, it's like, whew, you can't help but get a little grip before you bite off something really big, before you bite off something that's just like way bigger than yourself.
What was like the time frame for your AT through hike? Because it's rare that I talk to someone who has done so much shit that they just like I just haven't talked to them about through hiking the AT yet. Mm-hmm. So I'm just kind of curious, to try to learn some more of those details, I guess.
Yeah, totally.
And we'll get into some of the later stuff as we go on here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the AT through hike was super pedestrian, and I know that I've said this on your podcast in the past. The majority of the hiking that I do is very pedestrian, and that's not meant to be, an insulting term by any means. But like I said, guys, like I'm a very average human. I don't identify as an athlete, regardless of some of the days and some of the projects that I've been able to pull off. But I don't know, man. I just kind of feel as though it's kind of hard to explain a bit. I mean, it just kind of feel as though I'm not an athlete, and I'm the same as anybody else, just in terms of my level of capacity, and it's just the difference is that. I don't know. I spend more time these days going after I guess you would say more aggressive projects. But the AT was very pedestrian. I mean, I think I finished that trail in maybe 5 months, 2 days, I think was my total time. So very pedestrian. The PCT, 5.5 months. The long trail, that was 2007. That was one of the first trips that I took. It was 27 day hike, just like very normal, very pedestrian, very average, which is great because you have that genuine traditional through hiking experience. And yeah, the Appalachian Trail was very much that way. 5 months felt like super comfortable to me, man. I wasn't like rushing through anything. I was putting in the miles that I wanted to. Every day I ended up taking like 21 0 days, you know what I mean? So I had plenty of time off during that hike. And like, I think if you look at actual like hiking days, it's something like a 15 mile per day average. But if you look at like overall elapsed days, it's like even less than that. It's like pretty chill, I mean, that's how a lot of people get started, man.
Oh yeah.
If it weren't for those more pedestrian experiences, I don't necessarily think like I would be able to appreciate like some of the faster hiking, some of the more aggressive, some of the more aggressive hiking. So
yeah, dude, it makes a lot of sense for sure. So I guess while we're talking about the Appalachian Trail, there's the reason I went for that at the beginning of this episode and I initially tried to get you to gloss over the Mid-State Trail was because there's a big difference between a 90-mile hike and a 2,000+ mile hike. And again, that's not to deny the fact that the Mid-State Trail is a thru hike, or the Long Trail for that matter. Certainly thru hikes, but yeah, there's just a big difference there. And it sounds like you kind of didn't really stop after the AT, and it kind of just set you off on this trajectory. So can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a big difference between 92 miles on the Mid-State Trail and 275 miles on the Long Trail, and then nearly 2,200 miles on the Appalachian Trail. I mean, the Mid-State Trail certainly led to the Long Trail. The Long Trail certainly led to the Appalachian Trail. But the Appalachian Trail, stepping foot onto that thing, man, it was just such a wild, formative experience. I can't help but compare it to, stepping onto Mount Whitney, for the first time when I was 16. It just felt so big. It just felt so much bigger than myself. And, I learned right off the bat that I was going to need to be flexible when I was through hiking the Appalachian Trail. When I was taking a bus down to Georgia, my full kit, my entire backpack, got misplaced in like a bus transfer. It never got off my bus. These bus drivers, these Greyhound bus drivers, are responsible for moving your luggage and what have you. It never made it off the bus from one bus to another, and I ended up showing up in Georgia with no backpacking kit, no nothing but the clothes on my backpack, clothes on my back and a wallet. So I learned very quickly that. I was going to need to remain flexible and just kind of roll with the punches.
Before you even got to the trail, damn.
Yeah, it was insane, and also at the same time, it also taught me just how incredible the long distance hiking community was, because as soon as I got to that hostel, as soon as word started to spread around, like the hostel, what was going on, immediately this person comes out of the woodwork. This person comes out of the woodwork. Oh, dude, like I have a friend who can send a tent up. Oh, dude, I have this extra, thing. Damn. You can, and just starting to like build a kit for me basically. And I didn't really want any of their stuff. I just wanted my kit because I knew what I needed and I knew what I had kind of got dialed in from doing on the Long Trail. But it was just, an incredible way to start the trip, man. And as we all kind of know, as anybody who knows, who's been on a thru hike, the universe kind of opens up to you when you put yourself in an environment where anything is possible, like on a thru hike, like on an, like in an experience where you're walking through the mountains, walking through the woods for 6 months. I mean, you just kind of, you experience these larger than life moments, these very serendipitous moments. And that was really what my entire Appalachian Trail thru hike was. I mean, I just met the most kind-hearted, gracious people on that trip, the most iconic long distance hikers on that trip, the most humble and beginner kind of like not novice hikers, and everybody in between, man. And it was just such an incredible experience to be out there for 5 months and to really see the East Coast for the first time from such a unique perspective. I mean, dude. For sure. That was honestly a reason why I liked it so much, is because I love geography, and it's like I just get to you literally just said it. I'm gonna say the same thing. Like, you just get to experience the East Coast in such a unique way, and I think that was a really important thing for me too on the AT, and something that I feel like I'm kind of gonna miss on future thru hikes, just because I'm not as like personally invested in the West Coast, for instance. But speaking of the West Coast, dude, after the AT, so kind of getting back to this idea of like the trajectory, right? I feel like I said that weird trajectory, whatever. Well, here's the thing: is it projectory or is it trajectory?
I think it might be trajectory, honestly, dude.
I don't want to correct you, man.
I'm pretty sure you're right, though. You should correct me, because on the video I posted today, I like mispronounced the word advantageous, I think it is.
Advantageous.
See, there we go. I said advantageous.
Nice.
Completely unironically did not realize that I said it wrong. Edited the whole video, did not realize that I said it wrong. It wasn't until like 5 minutes before we started recording that my roommates had watched the video and were making fun of me for it that I realized. But
did you go back and re-record it or no?
No, dude, it's already uploaded, man.
Love it, dude.
It's already got 1,000 views.
Love it.
No going back now. But anyways, dude, trajectory. Post AT. What was next after that?
So after the Appalachian Trail, definitely needed to get some funds back in my pocket, obviously, after not working for 5 months. And the following summer, there wasn't necessarily enough money in the bank, so to speak, to go out and do another long, multi-thousand-mile hike, something like the PCT or the CDT, because both of those trails were absolutely on my radar. Coming off of the AT. But knowing I didn't necessarily have the money to fund something like that, what became more feasible was, just something out west, something maybe a month or two long. And so, after the Appalachian Trail that following summer, I went out and flew to Colorado for the first time. Actually, I didn't fly. I took a 52-hour bus ride, Greyhound bus ride.
That's brutal, man.
Dude, we could do a whole podcast on multi-state Greyhound bus travel, because I have some of the most wild stories you can possibly imagine from driving the Greyhound bus, up and down the East Coast, all the way over to California at certain points. But on this particular trip, it was a 52-hour Greyhound ride to Colorado, and I ended up taking on the Colorado Trail with one of my best friends, Andrew Bones. And that was a 480-mile hike from Denver to Durango across the Rocky Mountains. And that was my first taste of the American West. That was my first time being in the Western United States. That was my first time on Western trails, hiking on Western trails, backpacking on Western trails. This was the first time that I was ever at elevation. So, when we talk about the trajectory, I mean, it really was just small step by small step by small step. I mean, a lot of, most of the people on my Instagram page, most of the people on Facebook, most of like my quote unquote new friends, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They know me for the single year grid.
Yeah.
And they know me for this wild, ambitious project that I took on. What they don't realize is that I'm 35 years old, and that I've been, hiking for almost 20 years now, and hiking and backpacking for, the better part of 15, 16 years. And so this has all been just a progression, a lead up. It's been, taking on one project, letting all of your preconceived notions of what you think you're capable of, watching all those walls crumble down, taking on the next project, the same thing, go beyond your comfort zone, watch all those preconceived notions, crumble down, get that personal growth you were looking for, take on the next project. And it started with the Mid-State, went to the Long Trail, went to the Appalachian Trail, went to the Colorado Trail, which of course is much shorter than the AT, but those experiences were just as valuable, just as hard fought, just as difficult to get through, because like I'd never been out west before. I'd never been at elevation. Like I was getting chewed up and spit out there, man. Like I'm a East Coast boy trying to go up to 14,000 feet.
Let me ask you about that. So again, I'm like the same thing. I'm an East Coast boy. I hardly ever hiked out west, never backpacked out west. So what were like some of the challenges you faced on the Colorado Trail? At the beginning, say, as a self-proclaimed East Coast boy.
Yeah. I mean, the Western United States is just dry as hell, man. And like, yes, of course, on certain sections of the Colorado Trail, you're up at elevation and what have you. And there's, big portion toward the end, the San Juan Mountains, where you're at an average elevation of, 10,000 feet for, like a good portion of a very significant stretch. But right off the bat, leaving Denver, you're in kind of more arid, not necessarily high desert, but you're in kind of like the outskirts of the big mountains. And so it's very dry, it's very dusty, it's very exposed. So you're just out in the sun a ton, which obviously coming from the East Coast is not something that I was used to. And and even the lower parts of that trail, man, you're still traveling 7, 8,000 feet. Now, like, I'm not feeling huge, issues with altitude at 7 or 8,000 feet. But I mean, you start going up in small increments from there. And at least for me, you start to feel it. 10,000 feet, 11,000 feet, 12,000 feet. It definitely inhibits your physical capacity, at least so you get acclimatized. So, I mean, right off the bat, going to the Western United States, it was just very dry. I felt very dehydrated. I felt like I was, baking in the sun all day. I felt like I wasn't as powerful as I was used to being as a hiker, because I was at altitude. And also, in the Western United States, especially in places like Colorado, and especially, places like Washington and parts of California, I mean, the resupplies and what have you, and the long distance trails out there are just like so much longer, or they feel so much longer than some of the stuff on the AT, some of the stuff on the West Coast, on the East Coast, just because the structure that we have here, the foundation that we have here is so prevalent in terms of our trail networks. It's there's some insane statistic or some insane number regarding the AT, like how many the average distance between roads on the AT is something like 7 miles, or something like that. It's insane, man. I mean, and that's great, but like, the structure is there. Then you go out to the West Coast on the Colorado Trail, or like even further on the West Coast, something like the High Sierra, and it's like you're going 100 miles, you're going, 150 miles sometimes, like on your between resupplies. And then when you actually do get to a major highway, you got to hitchhike 30 miles into town. I mean, it just, everything felt bigger, man. Going out to Colorado, everything felt bigger. I was on a bus. I left the East Coast, and the Eastern Mountains disappeared. The Rocky Mountains came into vision, and just the whole through hiking experience felt way bigger. And when I finished when I finished the Colorado Trail, I definitely spent 35 hard-won days out there, and I knew the ultimate trajectory was the PCT, but walking away from that experience, the Colorado Trail, I was like, okay, when I actually do bite that off, this is going to be a real challenge. Not that the AT wasn't, not that the long trail wasn't, or the Colorado Trail, but based on the experience, or based off of my experience on the Colorado Trail, just dealing with the Western storms, man. You know what I mean? Like being in the Rockies above tree line, and just having thunderstorms come in
scares the shit out of me, dude.
It's insane,
I've talked
man.
about that on the show before. Like, fuck, that scares the shit out of me.
It's intimidating, and it's like clockwork. And it's like on the East Coast, it's like, cool, dude, let's roll into a shelter and hunker down, or let's get into our. But it's like, on the West Coast, it's like, holy shit, you just got to like make a mad dash for tree line, for the closest part of the trail where you're going to be out of harm's way, because it is very exposed. And so based off of those experiences, I knew when it was time to step up to the plate and take on the PCT, it was going to just be really tough. And that came to fruition, man. Just about a year later. I do want to point this one thing out, because we're kind of talking about this time frame in my life, and because this is a chapter that I don't even know if I've ever talked about publicly on like a podcast or given in an interview, but went on a very cool adventure after the Colorado Trail in 2009. So planned on being out in Colorado for about 2 months, but it took my buddy Bones and I, just over 30 days to complete the Colorado Trail. And my big dream at that point in my life had always been to go to Alaska. I just wanted to go to Alaska. I didn't care like what I did up there. I didn't care how much money I had or didn't have. I just wanted to like go to Alaska, dude, and like say that I went to Alaska. There was just like, obviously this huge mystique around Alaska, the Great North and the culture up there. And I just wanted to go to Alaska. And I was on like just a real heavy wave after coming off the Colorado Trail, just kind of beating my chest a little bit, having these big experiences. Then, at that point, for the first time in my life, really feeling like I was starting to develop like just a nice through hiking resume, the Mid-State Trail, the Long Trail, the AT, the Colorado Trail. It was just like, I felt like I was kind of taking steps towards being the person or becoming the person that I wanted to be. And I had always wanted to go to Alaska, and having an extra month on my hands, I was like, I somehow convinced my buddy Bones. I was like, dude, let's just take a month, try to hitchhike to Alaska, and see how long it takes us and like see like if we can get all the way there, right? Let's just see what happens. And I have no idea how I was able to convince this man to like, go along and try this thing out with me. But we finished the Colorado Trail in a town in southwestern Colorado called Durango. And we had some contacts in the area that drove us from Durango in southwest Colorado all the way across Colorado, all the way across Wyoming, into a tiny little corner of southeastern Montana called Sweetgrass, Montana. And they dumped us off on the side of the road, and we had big signs with our through hiking kits and our guitars, and we had big signs that just said north, no, very cryptic, just north. This is where we need to go. And it was a blazing hot day, and we stepped out onto the side of the highway, and we watched our friends disappear on the interstate, and we were like, dude, I have no idea like what this is going to be, what this is going to be like. And literally, dude, we have the signs up for 20 minutes. Gentleman pulls over in a brand new truck, the cushest ride you can possibly imagine. Yeah. Walk over to the window. Hey, how you doing, man? We're trying to get up to Glacier National Park. So that was our first stopping point. We had a friend working in Glacier National Park, and she was going to put us up for the night, and then we were going to cross the border with her. And I said, we're trying to get to Glacier National Park. It was, I think it was 9 hours away from where we were. And he said, well, I'm going to Missoula. That'll get you 8 hours. Yeah. And it was just like, oh my God, are you kidding? Like, what are the chances? I mean, just like this, the first dude that pulls over is going 8 hours in the direction that we're planning on going in a beautiful air conditioned, brand new truck, very cool dude, treating us to food. And we spent, I think, 15 days, man, hitchhiking 3,000 miles from Sweetgrass, Montana, over the Canadian border, through British Columbia, through the Yukon Territory, and eventually made it to Fairbanks, Alaska. And then from there, we hitchhiked all across the state, hiked all across the state, lived on the beach for a couple weeks in Homer on the Homer Spit. And it was, we could do a whole podcast on that, man. That trip was super formative, super mind-blowing. Seeing Alaska for the first time was incredible. I've since been back for a second time. And man, like these are the kinds of experiences I was having out there, dude. Like these were the kinds of pieces of life that I really felt like I wanted to, have a part of my story, a part of my personal narrative. I was very conscious of the idea at that point, and still, of course, today, but super conscious at that point in my life that, from the second you wake up in the morning to the second you close your eyes at night, you have this really, really incredible opportunity to contribute to your personal narrative. And I was just super hungry to, keep writing that thing at that point.
Dude, Alaska sounds sweet.
Let's go to Alaska, Kyle.
Dude, let's go to Alaska.
Dude, let's hitchhike to Alaska, man. I'll hitchhike from the white.
Hitchhike to Alaska.
No, dude. You gotta listen. Hear me. This was the same response.
Make a hell of a good YouTube video.
Listen, this was the same response that I got from my buddy Bones initially. Well, I don't know about hitchhiking, man. Let's just fly. But give me a couple months, Kyle. As soon as this quarantine lifts, dude, you and I are going to be on the road. Mark my words.
We'll see. Hopefully my mom and my employer are not listening.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we'll have to edit this part out.
Nah, dude, that's crazy.
Yeah,
I didn't know about that at all. That's the first time I've ever heard about that.
Yeah, good time. And then, when I finished that up, it was like immediately, my buddy Bones and I were looking at each other and it was like, okay, walked across Colorado together. Okay, hitchhiked up to Alaska together. Let's start the PCT together, man. We didn't have any solid plans to walk the whole thing side by side. We just knew that we were two kids who really wanted to bite off something like the PCT, and we just knew that we had similar styles, similar humor, similar nostalgia for because kind of being in the mountains and moments past, so to speak. And he's just a great friend and a great hiking partner. And we decided to start the PCT together that following April, after finishing the Colorado Trail and hitchhiking to Alaska the fall before.
And how long did you guys hike together on the PCT?
Bones and I hiked together solid pretty much every day. I would say all the way into the Sierra, so give or take like the first 800 or 900 miles.
So pretty good chunk though, yeah.
a good chunk. In the Sierra, we started to get into this habit of, you know, if there was one mismatch in terms of Bones and I, it was just he likes to sleep in, or at that point he liked to sleep in, and I like to get up and put in miles early.
Hmm.
I've always been that way, and so inevitably, I'd be ready to call it quits earlier, and he'd be more, more willing to, or more likely to walk on, and it just kind of got to a point where there were days where I was starting before him. We camp in the same place. I'd start before him, and he'd catch up or pass me that night, and we'd have dinner together, and he'd move on, and then the next morning I'd catch up to him and wake him up and be like, "Yo, dude, get going." And then he'd catch me. So at that point, we started to kind of get separated a bit, and that's going to happen, man. I mean, that's one of my best friends, and when you're both experienced and both comfortable in the mountains, it's just like that's gonna happen. So we hiked pretty much every day together the first 1,000 miles, and then I would say for like the second 1,000 miles, we were kind of on and off. We do huge sections together, and then maybe break up for a couple days here and there. I think like the longest time we ever spent apart was about 2 weeks. But I always knew where he was, and he always knew
and
where I
always
was.
close.
And it was like there were so many days, dude, where it was like I was so close to catching him, and then like I don't know, the thrill of the chase kind of like wore off, and I'm like, oh, I'll let these boys get ahead a little bit, just knowing, that I knew that I was close, and within a quarter-day hike or a half-day hike, it was kind of cool to play those games. And then when we got to the Bridge of the Gods, which is at the Columbia River, you cross over into Washington. Just because of my schedule, I had to get home and get to a friend's wedding.
The classic downfall of a thru hike, the wedding. You're not downfall, I know you still finished, but freaking did so many times on the AT, just like people had to just adjust their schedules and shit because of weddings.
And it's really funny because it wasn't just attending a wedding. I was presiding over this wedding.
So yeah, pretty important.
Yeah, and I was presiding over the wedding of two friends who I met on the AT and who also met each other on the Appalachian Trail. So this was a really important wedding that I committed to like right at the beginning of my thru hike. So couldn't bail on it, and yeah, I ended up walking all of Washington without Bones. So I would say that we walked, maybe like a good, probably half the PCT together, man.
Nice, dude. I was just curious because it's always interesting when people start a thru hike together. Now I know it's also different when you're two experienced hikers starting together who have a similar pace versus two inexperienced hikers, or one experienced hiker and one inexperienced hiker. I don't know if you can hear my smoke alarm going off in the background there.
I heard a little beep beep. I wasn't quite sure what was going on, Kyle. Didn't know if you had a new pet over in your residence or what's going on.
Dude, so normally I usually give like 5 or 10 minutes for an end of episode story, but dude, you can talk, and just based on the picture which everybody is going to know about in just a minute. Or probably already saw, because I'm actually going to use that one for the thumbnail for the episode. So
I love it.
Yeah, dude, the Whitney story. Let's hear it.
Mount Whitney. Yeah. So this is this is a story that I've written a little bit about on the Finding Philip Facebook page. I've written a little bit about it on the Instagram page, the Finding Philip Instagram page, but I've never talked about it openly in an interview or in a podcast. So I'm kind of looking forward to telling this story.
Hell
this is it'd be easy to look at this story as kind of a low light of my hiking experiences, but I truly see it as a highlight because like so many of the experiences we've talked about tonight, it was very very formative and was just chock full of very valuable life lessons that I've taken with me moving forward. Mm-hmm. And so the story that I want to tell you is about the afternoon that I nearly died on the shoulder of Mount Whitney. Mount Whitney is the highest peak in the contiguous 48, so the highest peak in the lower 48. It sits at 14,504 feet, I believe, above sea level in the Sierra Nevada mountains of Central California. And I first climbed Mount Whitney on the PCT in 2010. It's about 8 miles one way off of the PCT, and it's a very standard alternate or standard detour to take when you're on the PCT. Climb Mount Whitney, climb the highest peak in the contiguous, and I did that on my PCT through hike, and when I did that again, such a formative experience. I mean, it's such a beautiful mountain. There was just something about that peak, something about the surrounding landscape, something about being higher than anyone else in the lower 48. It just spoke to me in a deep way. And in the years after climbing Mount Whitney on the PCT, I continued to go back. And to this day, I've climbed Mount Whitney 5 times now, including the summit that I made on my PCT attempt, and including the summit that I made on this particular trip that I'm going to talk about. On my fourth attempt of Mount Whitney, I decided to deviate from the standard route that I had taken almost every time that I had climbed Whitney previously. This time, I wanted to take a route called the Mountaineers route, and this is a much more technical route. If you've got rock climbing gear, it can absolutely be a rock climbing route. If you've just got, hiking shoes, hiking boots, and kind of hiking gear, it can be, a route that can be scrambled, but you're doing, class 5 grades of scrambling, and it doesn't require technical gear, but you are very exposed and you are very, very high up again on the shoulder of Mount Whitney. And this is just different from the standard route that people take. Normally, you go up the Mount Whitney Trail. It's 12 miles one way. You climb about 6,000 feet vertical. Yes, it's tough, but primarily because you are at altitude. Other than that, I mean, the Mount Whitney Trail is famous for having over 96 switchbacks over the course of like a very short period of trail. I mean, it's we take the altitude out of the equation, and it's just it's not that difficult of a hike. This is the standard route that people go up. When you hike the PCT, you come up the backside, but the Mountaineers route is very different. It has a very different feel. A little bit of bushwhacking and a lot of technical scrambling at elevation. While you're exposed a good deal. So ended up getting my permits and ended up driving up the Portal Road. Ended up getting onto the Mount Whitney Trail and breaking off onto the Mountaineers route. And the way that the route kind of works is you come to a lake around 12,000 feet called Iceberg Lake. It's a beautiful lake. If you guys go on my Instagram page, you'll see pictures of it as well. Beautiful lake, and you're effectively like 2 very, very, very steep miles, 2-3 very, very steep miles to the summit of Mount Whitney. But you're camped literally at this lake, like at the base of the spires that lead up to the summit. It's so iconic. It's unbelievable. And usually you'll climb up there on day 1, make camp, and then early on day 2, you will go up to the summit and either back down to your base camp, spend the night, and then go down the following day on day 3, or you just make the full descent that second day. So had a pretty uneventful trip up to base camp, up to Iceberg Lake. Got up there super early, made some incredible images, some of the best images I've ever taken, I believe personally. And went to sleep under a beautiful sky. I got a great night's sleep. Woke up very early the next morning and started going up the Mountaineers route. And I'd be lying if I said that it wasn't intimidating. I mean, the night before, there was actually a gentleman, as I was laying awake in my, underneath my tarp, at night in the dark, I could see a gentleman start to go up the Mountaineers route in the dark, and he had his headlamp on, and I watched him for almost an hour, man. And it's intimidating, it is an incredible face. And I recommend anybody to at least hike up to Iceberg Lake and look at Mount Whitney from this particular standpoint, because it is truly iconic, man. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I start heading up this particular route. I start heading up this section of trail leading out of Iceberg Lake very early in the morning. Have a beautiful hike up. There were a couple sections that were a couple little catwalk sections that were a little intimidating, but nothing that I hadn't seen before. Being in the Sierra, being in the Sierra at high snow levels, even in the White Mountains, man, some of the real technical stuff in Huntington Ravine and what have you. I mean, you are, you're not at elevation, but you're looking at, some pretty big drops if you take a misstep. So I was reasonably comfortable, got up to the summit, 4th time on the summit of Mount Whitney, turn around, come back down, get back to my base camp super early, man. I think I was back down to my base camp before noon, right? So I'm feeling confident as hell. And I end up slipping into my tent, taking a nap, chilling, just enjoying, my 4th summit, enjoying being in the Sierra Nevada. The Sierra Nevada mountains, outside of the Whites, for me personally, are probably the mountain range that I've connected with the most on, just like on a spiritual level. The Sierra are are unbelievable, man. When you go and hike the PCT, Kyle, like you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
I'm stoked.
Yeah. But slipped into my tent, slept for like 4 hours, man. Right. So I wake up around 4 o'clock, and we were just talking about the storm systems that come in the Western United States like clockwork. I get out of my tent and I can see like rain clouds coming in, but it's something like 4 or 5, maybe 6 miles down to my tent, down to my car, down to my truck, and I'm like, you know what, this isn't a big deal. Let's just get out of here. We'll pack our stuff up. We'll crash the truck, or we'll get back into town. Let's just call this a trip. It's going to be raining tonight anyway. Let's get out of here. And pack my stuff up, man. I'm cruising down the trail. And at a certain point, it's like I'm just feeling very, just very open, very adventurous, very curious. I'm riding this high. I'm riding this wave. I'm alone in the Sierra Nevada mountains, this mountain range that I love at 12,000 feet. I kind of have like this little buzz going on, man. It's pretty amazing. And I decide to get off trail. And as I'm getting off trail, I'm starting to hike down through this gully, this boulder choked gully. And so it's almost like the Talus Fields in the White Mountains. Like just picture the Talus Fields in the White Mountains that have these massive, large boulders that you're kind of rock hopping over. It's very much like this, and they get bigger and bigger. And eventually they kind of they lead out to this this cliffed out area, but it's not a cliff. It's not a straight drop. It's a steeply graded descent back down to the main trail. I can see the main trail off in the distance, and this is a bushwhack at this point for all intents and purposes, and it sounds pretty gnarly. 12,000 feet. It's starting to rain. You're bushwhacking by yourself in the Sierra Nevada, but I could see where the trail was, man, and I felt very comfortable. There wasn't any kind of feeling of intimidation, and I start to down climb this very steep grade. And I'm down climbing, and the rain starts to pick up, and eventually I get to this set of ledges, these granite ledges, and they've got quite a steep pitch to them, but I've sussed out this drop. I feel like I had sussed out the drop. I'd sussed out all the weak points. I had sussed out, where I should head so that I'm not facing any kind of notable drop if I fell. And unfortunately, I just didn't suss that out quite enough. So it starts to pour. And again, this is at 12,000 feet, 11.5, pretty chilly, even in the middle of summer. And the rain's coming down in buckets, and these granite ledges, these smooth granite ledges start to get very slick. And so to kind of secure myself more, I get on my hands, I get on my feet and my hands, kind of, with my ass on the ground, kind of, having 5 points of contact, sliding down these granite ledges, and honestly, like, the ledges were steep, but they were not intimidating in a way where I truly felt like I was in the kind of danger that I now know that I was. Because as I kind of reached the end of one of these ledges, there was just this instantaneous moment, man. Again, I'm sitting on my ass. I've got my hands behind me. I've got my feet out in front of me, where I just felt all friction disappear. Felt all friction let loose, and it was one of those moments where you just instantaneously know what is happening, the reality of what is happening, and I knew instantaneously that there was no. I mean, I remember kind of just trying to grip on for a second to the rock, like not knowing what was beyond what I could see, right? And it was just so smooth and so featureless that it was just. I gave myself over to whatever was coming, because it was very apparent that I could not grab onto anything, and I went over this edge, man, and that's kind of the last thing that I remember. I don't have a clear vision of how far I dropped. I don't know how long I was in the air. I don't remember hitting the ground, but I did fall at the very least. I would say 30 feet, maybe more, onto what I can only assume is some kind of rocky, rooty, but bouldery talus terrain. I was knocked unconscious, so I'm assuming I hit the ground, feet first, and then hit my head because I was knocked unconscious. And again, this is about 12,000 feet, 11,000 feet in the Sierra Nevada mountains by myself. I'm off trail. Nobody has any idea where the fuck I am, and I'm in a rainstorm. I'm soaked through. I'm cold as hell. And the next thing that I remember, I am walking down the main trail. So I don't have any recollection of coming to. I don't have any recollection of of getting my belongings together or finding my way back onto the main trail. The next thing that I remember is I'm actually walking and there's blood all over me. I mean, like my hands, my fleece, everything is covered in blood, and I'm following somebody. And it's very difficult to describe this experience because I'm coming to, and I've kind of known that there's been an accident. I know that there's been a fall, but I don't know who this person is in front of me. I just kind of know that I'm following him, and I just know that shit is really, really, really bad.
Yeah.
And so, who this gentleman turns out to be, is a gentleman practicing emergency medicine in the San Francisco Bay Area who is also a rock climber who came up to the Sierra Nevada with two other people and was hoping to rock climb, was met with the same storm that I was. And basically he left his team, the two other people in his group, underneath a boulder hang out of the rain so that he could go up and kind of see if there was any tangible way for him to climb, for him to get his team up to climb. And as he was going up and just kind of checking things out, he sees me totally bloody, kind of stumbling around off trail, immediately runs over to me. I've got a massive, massive gash across the top of my forehead, massive, massive gash behind the back of my ear. He puts a bandana around my head and he starts leading me back to his team that is underneath this overhang. So this is what happened. I don't have any recollection of this. I'm just coming to as I'm following this man down to the boulder overhang to meet the rest of his team. So we turn the corner, meet these two other people. There's another gentleman and a young lady there. They're obviously shocked. He's pretty shaken himself. Again, we're at 11,000 feet, man. Like, we're out in the middle of nowhere. Ain't nobody coming out there to rescue me. To get down the mountain, there's more down climbing. There's more odd, scrambly stuff. It's kind of a nightmare scenario, and these guys are now kind of responsible for me in a lot of ways. So they get me out of my wet clothes. They assess the situation. They try to make contact with search and rescue just to like let them know what's going on, that there's somebody who has concussion at altitude, like, and that, we're going to have to spend the night out here. There's just no way that they were going to come in. There was no way that they were going to send a chopper in. It was like, we were staying out there for sure. So these guys were just basically a lifeline, man. Like, I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't come across this gentleman. I don't even like to think about what would have happened or what my chances would have been. I don't know if I would have had the wherewithal in the amount of time that I needed to have that wherewithal to get myself out of my clothing, to get my tent set up, to get something around my head to stop the massive amount of bleeding. And these guys did all of that, man. They took me out of my fucking clothes. They put me into their tent, and I laid in their tent in my sleeping bag in a pile of my own blood, a pool of my own blood, overnight with this dude, shaking me every 2 hours to make sure that I'm fucking good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was a pretty dramatic experience. And it's like, I'm laying there for 12 hours feeling like I have just been hit with a fucking bus. It was really, really intense. And the entire time knowing, man, that I was in that position, not because of anybody else, not even because I was out there doing everything right. It's because I got brazen, I got overconfident, I got on a wave, and I rode that wave way, way too long. And I ended up crashing into shore, and I paid for it dearly. And that was really hard to sit with, as well. Not only for those 12 hours, but also in the coming days, because, the incident certainly didn't end on the mountain. The next morning we wake up, blue sky, of course, the way that it usually is in the mountains after a storm passes, in the Western mountains after a storm passes, the next morning, everything is beautiful. But again, we still got to get down to the car, dude, several miles. And there is down climbing, there's scrambling, and I'm feeling gripped, man. Like, I'm feeling genuinely gripped. There is a fear in me that I hadn't really experienced before in the outdoors. And so we're coming up to some of these down climbs, and I'm asking this guy to belay me down these, no joke, man. I'm asking him to belay me down some of these little down climbs, because they just had me so nervous about falling, man. And I just felt like I was in such a fragile state. And luckily these guys were so accommodating. And, they, like, this gentleman just kept telling me, like, dude, PTSD is real. PTSD is real. Trust me. Like, I understand, like, this is a very serious experience that you've been through. And, certainly had the true, genuine, bedside manner of a talented, emergency physician. And it was just, they were such a lifeline to me, man. I don't know what would have happened, because, you get down to the parking lot, and then that starts phase 2. First of all, you got to drive 7-8 miles down the portal road, which the portal road is your in and out point to the Mount Whitney trailhead. It gets you down to this town called Lone Pine. Lone Pine is a tiny, sleepy little mountain town in the middle of the 395 corridor in the Eastern Sierra. Not much out there. Kind of a tourist-driven but slightly post-apocalyptic feeling wasteland in the Eastern Sierra. It's a truly unique and beautiful place, and I hope everybody, after listening to this, goes out there. But it's a windy road, man, full of switchbacks, and you are constantly kind of looking over the edge, and like that getting down that road was an experience unto itself. It was absolutely sickening to drive down that road. And then, of course, there's no way having a concussion, there's no way being as messed up as I really was, man, because yes, my head was opened up, yes, my ear was opened up, but like, again, I was feeling as though I had been hit by a bus, in every kind of corner and crevice of my body. I definitely experienced physical trauma, beyond just the concussion and my head wounds. I mean, like, I felt really messed up after falling, just sore and black and blue everywhere. And you guys will see the photo on the teaser photo for the episode. I mean, like, my face blew up, man. It was absolutely insane. So just getting back to Lone Pine, getting into their clinic, because there was no way in that condition I was going to drive down to San Diego and actually see a surgeon, or see it. Going into their little clinic, sitting there for 2 hours, having this dude spend another hour, gently soaking the bandana that had been wrapped around my head for a day, so that he could actually remove it without like ripping more of my skin off. And then actually going through the 18 stitches that they had to put in my face, and then the 12 stitches that they had to put behind my ear. That was kind of like the insult to injury, man. Sitting there, having this man put injection of Novocaine after injection of Novocaine into my face, feeling them work those stitches, just a little gauze pad over my face, or kind of like a little protective gauze, so there's nothing getting in my face. But having him effectively put these sutures in, operate right next to my eyes, right on my face, and then flipping me over and having to sew my ear up, that was just those few hours there, man, gave me a real good opportunity to think over the decisions that I made on that day, and really what could have happened to me after the fact, because this was this was less than 2 years after my father died, man. I was still feeling the the just reeling kind of grief, of losing somebody that close to me. And I knew firsthand, it was very fresh in my mind, what happens to your family when you lose somebody like that. And it was very apparent to me, what my brother was still going through, what my sister was still going through, what my mother was still going through. And the idea that I was effectively out there putting myself in a position where I could do the same thing to them again, less than 2 years later. I mean, sitting there in the tent, in a pool of my own blood, no exaggeration, thinking about that for 12 hours, and then sitting there for several hours, having your face, your mangled face, effectively operated on, thinking about that. Let me tell you, man, it definitely conjures up some realizations. And it's just that experience, man, was one for the storybooks, and it taught me so much. And really, I don't want to end it on such a negative note. I want to kind of conclude saying this, because it's super relevant for where my life is right now. So that was my 4th summit of Mount Whitney. And luckily I got to the summit of that mountain before I fell. So I did have 4 complete summits. I got out on my own 2 feet. So I did have 4 complete summits. The following summer, it was very important to me, man, to get back on that mountain, to get back on Mount Whitney, to get back to that high point. I didn't feel like I needed to do the Mountaineers route again. I didn't feel like I needed to take all that risk, but I felt like I needed to get back on that mountain. And when I fell, this was 2016. Okay. So earlier that year, I had done the double single season in the White Mountains. I'd climbed all 48 4,000 footers twice in a single winter season, and this was kind of in loose preparation for the grid. In 2016, while I fell on Mount Whitney, Sue Johnson was out completing the first calendar year grid, and so when I came home after falling, I was feeling deflated because I just went through this accident, and also because of course this big dream that I had just been taken on by a white mountain icon and done it so convincingly. It just felt important the following year to get back out to Mount Whitney, and I went back out to Mount Whitney, and I got my 5th summit, and it wasn't until getting to the summit and jogging down off the summit that day, I remember it very, very vividly. Having read about Sue's calendar year grid, and watched her execute that, and read about it after the fact, and reading, having read the commentary at that point from her about how you would go about putting the fastest known time for the grid together if you were really looking to do the lowest elapsed days, like having all that information in my head, watching her do it in combination with almost losing my life the year prior on the same mountain. Like, I just remember coming down into the trailhead that night, man, after climbing Mount Whitney, and it was my first single day summit of Mount Whitney, that last summit that I did. And I just came into my truck with this feeling like life is so short, and I knew that after my dad died. I knew that from the time that I was 16, 17 years old, man. But I just came back into my truck that evening, the Mount Whitney trailhead, the same place that I walked out a year before, nearly dead. And I just thought to myself, life is so short, man. And you only have this moment, and look how much can change in a year. And I genuinely mean this when I say that in that parking lot, in the Whitney Portal parking lot, in 2017, coming off my 5th summit of Mount Whitney, that was the moment that I decided that I was going to take on the single year grid without a doubt. I was out in California working, so I figured I would come home that fall and work as much as I could that fall, and start training that 2018 with a bid on the single year grid starting that following fall.
Dude,
and I
freaking.
Yeah.
So what a way to wrap that up. Like,
yeah, dude.
I'm glad you were able to kind of circle it back to the single year grid, because we haven't even talked about that this whole episode. So
yeah, it's all good, man. I mean, your listeners have the single year grid story very extensively in 3 episodes. But yeah, man, that was a pivotal point in my journey as a long distance hiker, long distance backpacker, long distance runner, and also in the origin story of the single year grid, man. That was the day that I made the decision. So everything happens for a reason, my man. And, everybody kind of knows the rest. The rest is history. Now we're here.
So incredible, man. Philip Carcia, it's a pleasure as always. Dude, plug your shit. I'm sure pretty much everybody already knows, but
yeah. I'll take a real quick second here. So if you guys want to find me on social media, it's Finding Philip on Facebook, Finding Philip on Instagram. I also have a website, which is findingphilip.com. I also want to really quickly plug a digital online speaker series that I'm curating right now. We're halfway through every Saturday in the month of April. I am on Zoom, and I am giving a presentation on a different topic. The first week was the single year grid. Last week was the White Mountain Diartissima. This upcoming Saturday at 7 p.m., I'm going to go behind the scenes of my artwork, my video work, my photo work, give you guys a little bit of context to how I shoot, why I shoot that way, what the images look like before I edit, what they look like after I edit, and how I use those to kind of tell my story. And then the last Saturday of April, it will be an encore presentation of the single year grid. These are totally free, donation-based presentations, and you guys can jump on Zoom. Like I said, every Saturday night in April, the Zoom ID is always the same, 576-319-2019. Easy way to remember that, 576 for the number of peaks in the grid, 319 for the fastest known time, and 2019-2019 for the year that was set. And then you guys just need a password to get into the Zoom chat, and that will be the Wolf, all lowercase, one word. So come in and join us. If this quarantine and what have you lasts into May, I'll also be doing talks on Saturday nights in May, again, 100% free. And yeah, just very graciously accepting any donations that you guys might be able to put forth for that. But yeah, come join us. Come follow along, man. Hopefully have some cool things planned for 2020 as well. And yeah, Kyle, it's just like always a pleasure, man. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity from day one to come on here and be able to, yeah, share my story with your listeners, man. It's an honor. I mean that, man.
Well, I really appreciate that, dude, and back at you. I mean,
cool.
Your episodes are among the most downloaded. I still get messages about them from time to time.
Sweet.
And you're still a very highly requested guest, so I'm excited to put this one out, man. I got to start editing this shit like right when we're done recording to get it out on time. But
yes, sir.
It's all good, man. Thank you so much, Philip, and thank you to everybody listening. That's gonna do it until our next episode, whenever that is, probably sometime soon. Hopefully, have a good one.
Yeah, man. More coming soon. We'll talk to you soon, Kyle.